self-harm is such an important one. Thanks for being here to get the latest information to help your clients. As everyone's getting settled in, I'll take just a moment to orient you a bit. I'm Victoria. I'm on the PESI team that plans trainings. I'll be moderating today's sessions. With so many clinicians on live today, the chat feature in Zoom will be off, but in a little while, we'll turn on the Q&A. When we do, please enter content-related questions for our presenters there. But before you do, please see if someone else already asked your question. And if they did, can you upvote it instead of asking again? That'll help ensure I know that questions that are really most frequently asked and can get as many of them to the presenters as possible. Any technical or other questions for PESI, please take a look at the FAQ tab in your portal. If you have questions about CE credits, check the CE tab in your portal. If you didn't already sign up for a CE upgrade package today, you can still do so for live credits if you're planning on staying with us all day today and tomorrow. Or if you can't watch the full training, you can pre-order the self-study version. In your portal are also your handouts and a virtual store chock full of more training resources. Take a look at those anytime. Let's get started now. Though she needs no introduction, I'll give her one. Dr. Sue Johnson is one of our field's greatest innovators. She is the primary developer of emotionally focused therapy, which cuts across modalities to serve individuals, couples, and families, and has demonstrated effectiveness in over 30 years of peer-reviewed research. Sue is the founding director of the International Center for Excellence in Emotionally Focused Therapy, ICEFT, and holds distinguished faculty positions at multiple universities. She's the author of numerous books and articles, including Attachment Theory and Practice, The Practice of Emotionally Focused Couple Therapy, and Emotionally Focused Couple Therapy with Trauma Survivors. Sue trains behavioral health providers in EFT worldwide and consults to over 75 international institutes and affiliated centers who practice EFT. She also consults to Veterans Affairs and the US and Canadian militaries. Welcome, Sue. Thank you so much for being with us this morning.
That's quite an introduction, Victoria. It's very early where I am. I just feel like having a nap after you've said all that.
Perfect.
Hi, everybody. I'm so pleased you're with me. We only have a little bit of time together. We have an hour or a little bit less because I'm going to try and make some time for you to ask your questions. I always like the Q&A section of a talk best. So we have a little bit of time only. I'm going to talk to you very briefly about self-harm, which is, if you look in the studies, it's called magically kind of NSSI, non-suicidal self-injury. I'm going to talk to you very briefly about it. And then I'm going to talk about emotionally focused individual therapy, which you're probably not as familiar with as you are with AFT for couples. We work a lot with trauma in couples and in individuals. So I'm going to talk to you about EFIT, nice acronym, isn't it? Making people not just less symptomatic, but fit for life. I'll talk to you about EFIT and how we see a self-injury as part of EFIT and sort of integrate it as a symptom of trauma, but also primarily and always as an attempt to deal with overwhelming affect, emotion, an attempt to deal with what we call no solution vulnerability. That's what I'm going to talk to you about. And, you know, there aren't many ways to escape from no solution vulnerability. So I'm going to talk to you about that and how we see trauma and how we see working. And it'll be brief, but I hope that it will inspire you to go and look at the primer that came out last year, the primer in emotionally focused individual therapy, and to look at our website, www.iceeft.com, to see all our research articles and all the chapters, et cetera, on our work. Okay, so self-harm. There is a phenomenon these days where there's certain kind of self-harm that comes out of wanting to conform and fit and join your peers on the internet and say that you do cut, especially maybe your arms. So we're not really talking about that. That is a sort of, from our point of view, it's still important, but it's not really talking about what we're looking at, which is a habitual tendency to hurt yourself in order to lessen your emotional pain. And of course, that unfortunately, that's one of those strategies that might work for a moment, might work in the immediate moment, but has consequences of its own and leads right back usually into feeling ashamed, feeling lost, alone, sad, and trauma symptoms. So the research reports that this is alarming, I think, that 5 to 9% of adolescents in Western countries at least play with some sort of self-harm, and it's higher in women, it's higher in girls. That is alarming, given that the latest data says that we have an epidemic of anxiety and depression, especially in our young women. I think this is deeply disturbing if you care about mental health. So most of the time, when somebody tells you that they're cutting, which is the usual, if you like, the usual way that people do self-harm, okay, is to cut, often the inside of their arms, the inside of their legs. Some people take self-harm to make it broader and say, well, binging is self-harm. But I think it's more useful to just think about it, especially in this talk, in a more narrow frame. Usually it reflects childhood trauma. It's part of the picture of complex PTSD. And complex PTSD is a very specific phenomena where a child and then an adult that grows from that child is in an impossible situation in terms of survival codes. It's in an impossible situation because the people it counts on to be the source of comfort and support are also the people who terrify and deliver the trauma. So closeness is absolutely longed for, absolutely important. The world is a dangerous place. You need connection more and more. And when you start to think about it, you understand that connection is one of the most dangerous places in the world. So other people are the source of and solution to fear. If you think about that for a minute, that's a completely impossible, crazy-making dilemma for a child to be in, and it ricochets forward into adulthood. So it is important to pay attention to self-injury because it is a predictor of future suicidal behavior. You're about 4 times more likely to to try suicide as an adult, okay, so if you are used to doing this self-harm. So most of the time the literature talks about that this is about intense emotion and the desire to suppress intense emotion. Oh, if you understand emotion here, and you understand, as we do, that depression, anxiety, and PTSD are all emotional disorders, at the heart of all of those things is an inability to regulate your emotion and being overwhelmed with all kinds of negative emotion. That's what at the heart of these disorders, right? So at the heart of this is the attempt usually to suppress emotion. It's important to understand that if you try to suppress emotion, effort is involved. It's literally pushing down. It stresses your body. Your body, you have to work at it. You have to absolutely work at it. And the tricky part about that is you push it down and push it down and push it down, and then you can't do it anymore. And it rebounds. And as it rebounds, it takes you over even more, and it's even stronger. So suppression is actually one of the worst strategies anyone can possibly adopt to deal with their emotion. So for us, self-injury is part of what we call the trauma trap. We think of isolation as an inherent part of trauma. Isolation really cripples you in terms of being able to cope with trauma. And I'll talk a bit about where that comes from. It comes from attachment science, which is the basis of one of the bases of our EFT sort of pillars that we stand on. We talk about the trauma trap in that often your clients will be overwhelmed by what John Bowlby, the father of attachment theory, calls frightening, alien, and unacceptable emotion. Frightening, alien, you can't integrate it. It's something strange. You can't accept it. Frightening, alien, unacceptable emotion. People are caught in that, and they find ways to regulate it, which look like protection, but become a prison. The regulation works for a moment, but it has negative consequences. It leaves people more alone, more ashamed, more sad, and then it just feeds back into the inability to regulate the emotion. The ineffective strategy moves back into and feeds the pain, and the trauma continues. So it's like PTSD is a process. It's not just the echoes of the past coming forward. It's an active process that you engage in the moment. And part of that process is your attempts to regulate this emotion, which backfire and lead you straight back into the pain. And we call that the trauma trap. If you listen to people talk about their motives, they talk about affect regulation. They sometimes talk about punishing themselves. I deserve this pain and it feels better for me to punish myself. But overwhelmingly, they talk about turning emotion up or turning it down. They talk about the fact that when you cut yourself, you have a sense of control. Your pain becomes predictable. We love predictability. Our brains hate uncertainty. So rather than waiting for the pain to come for you, you actually inflict the pain. And when you do that, the pain stops for a while and you say, I'm in control. So you're trying to deal with the pain, by actually people talk about, it calms me, I calm myself, I release the pressure, I inflict the pain, then it stops for a moment, I feel relieved, I feel in control. This is turning this pain down by focusing on the actual physical pain on your arm, which makes sense if you think that our brains can deal with specific cues. Our brains can't deal with incredible, overwhelming cues. So, the pain in my arm is more able to be dealt with than my horrible memories of trauma, etc. The other thing people talk about, and I'm going to talk about a case where my client talks about this, is they talk about it as dealing with numbing, not just dealing with hyperarousal, but dealing with numbing. So my client that I'm going to talk about, Allison, she uses cutting and she uses head banging to get out of being numb. She says to me, she was raped all through her childhood. She has complex PTSD and about 5 other diagnoses. And she says to me, I don't want to feel, I can't feel, it's too much, I can't bear it, I can't feel, and I can't live numb. I can't live numb. I'm just not alive. I'm just a zombie. So as part of her affect regulation sequence strategy, and we put this all together in emotionally focused individual therapy very systematically, when she talks about, I end up in a fog, how does she get out of that fog? Well, she goes and she bangs her head against the wall. She's not doing that so much now. She's a young adult, but as an adolescent, she used to do that all the time. And then she says, it would bring me out of the fog. I would feel alive again. So this is all about affect regulation. The research says that you're more likely to engage in these behaviors if you have high social anxiety, which of course means that the greatest resource for us to deal with trauma, which is other people, turning and confiding in other people, is not available. So you are dealing with trauma alone. You are not designed, your nervous system, you are not wired to deal with trauma alone. You're just not wired for it. So, when you are forced to deal with trauma alone, then you start to do really extreme ways of trying to deal with that affect. So more social anxiety, less contact with other people, less contact with peers and friends, and the inability to confide, the inability to really turn to other people and use other people as a resource. Okay, the best predictor of almost every sign of mental health in the world is that you can reach, risk, turn to others, and take in the natural comfort that being together with somebody gives you. This is our main survival code as human beings. This comes out of attachment science. So if we think about that, that's a very brief picture of injury. What do we do in EFIT? If you don't know what EFIT is, it's the individual version of the couples therapy that has been so successful. It's a humanistic therapy. Carl Rogers is the main father of those kinds of therapies. And it focuses on how people put together their experience and the way they regulate that experience in the moment in front of you. You go in and you attune to people, you tune into them so you are with them, they are not alone, and you go into how they put their experience together in the moment. And as you do that, of course, this experience becomes ordered, clearer, more manageable, right? And also it starts to change because what you can look at and stay with and tolerate and listen to and befriend, right? You can explore and it can start to change. So EFT and EFIT happens in the present with a attuned, open, responsive therapist with really a surrogate attachment figure helping you walk through into traumatic experiences and then helping you walk into and through those experiences and taking you home to the goal of EFIT, which is not just symptom reduction. It is a secure sense of connection with self. You trust yourself, you feel worthy, you know you can cope with the experience that's coming towards you, you can process it, right? You trust yourself, you can rely on you, and you can rely on others. So a secure sense of connection with self and with others that leads to resilience is the goal of EFIT. EFIT is like Carl Rogers having a deep conversation with John Bowlby, who is the father of attachment theory. I want to stress, which I stress in every talk I've given in the last 20 years, I want to stress that attachment theory, or I should say attachment science, which is the basis of EFIT and EFT, basically is the best map we have to who we are as human beings. It tells us who we are. We are highly social human beings who depend on others for our sense of self, our sense of connection with the world, our resilience, our sense of safety. Okay, so basically the attachment model and Rogers model suggests that emotion is core. Emotion is the primary organizer of your inner world and the way you connect with others. It's the music that plays that defines how you dance with yourself and with other people. So from our point of view, affect and going into emotion, regulating it, staying with it, moving through it, processing it, is the core element in any effective psychotherapy. And we do it directly. We do it in an on-target way, talking about affect, reflecting on it, having insight, dealing with skills to deal with affect that you can only use when you don't really need them, when you're calm. From our point of view, those things are the booby prize. Essentially, what Bowlby and Rogers believed is that connection with others and a sense of safety with others is where we live as human beings. It's our ecological niche. It's the sea we swim in. We're the fish in a relational sea. And when you take the fish out of the sea, it looks very strange. The great thing about Bowlby and Rogers was they were both non-pathologizing. We see people as stuck, not as sick or bad or fitting into the DSM categories, which from our point of view are as confusing as they are useful. We see people as stuck in certain ways of processing their experience that leads back into that experience, and the way they protect themselves becomes a prison. So Bowlby said, if you understand, and attachment gives you a map to this. In EFIT, we have a map to this, which really helps us tune into people and lead people forward. He said, if you understand people's basic longings, fears, the places they get stuck, who they basically are as human beings from an attachment point of view, if you understand how terrified we all are of rejection, abandonment, deprivation, aloneness, if you understand that, then everything that everybody does to try and mitigate those feelings is perfectly reasonable. And your job is to find the logic and the reason behind really destructive behaviors, really crazy behaviors, really behaviors that say, oh, there's some person is just damaged. That's your job. Your job is to go in and non-pathologize and believe in people's ability to grow. So EFIT is an attachment model. It's a humanistic model. And of course, it's based also on our 35 years of research in EFT, where we have sat and looked at thousands of tapes and watched how people regulate their emotion or cannot regulate their emotion, you know, how they can move into a more secure sense of self, or how they get completely caught and cannot really do anything except desperately try to bat off this emotion as it comes towards them. So if you looked at an EFIT therapist working, and I'm going to talk in a general way for a couple more minutes, and then I'm going to talk about the main intervention sequence in EFIT called the EFT Tango. It's called the Tango, not just because I, until COVID anyway, was a obsessed Argentine tango dancer. It's called the Tango because tango, if you don't look at Dancing with the Stars, tango is all about attunement. It's all about tuning into another human being, reading the cues in your own body that the music is helping you with, the emotional music, reading the cues in your own body, reading your cues in their body, tuning in, and then beginning to move together in integrated synchrony, which is a good metaphor for emotional and mental health, I think. So it's called the Tango, and we'll talk briefly about that. Okay. So if you look at an EFT therapist, an EFIT therapist, and I think these things I'm going to say to you, obviously, for me, make EFIT a perfect trauma therapy, a perfect fit for how trauma shows up and how to cope with and deal with trauma. First of all, we have a very particular way of making a safe alliance. We see ourselves as surrogate attachment figures. We start not with collecting symptoms or doing assessments or asking questions. We start with an invitation. An invitation. There's a beautiful little song that I sing when I'm on the exercise bike. It's called The Wood River. And it starts with a little phrase that says, oh, won't you come with me where the wood river flows? Oh, won't you come with me? And really, the EFT therapist meets the client, engages with them, and it really says, will you come with me on a journey? I'm here. I can tune into your emotions. I can be with you. I will be open and engaged. We do this in a way that speaks to our nervous system, to our longing for connection and safety with another human being. We focus on emotion. We track it. We listen to it. We validate it. We evoke it if nothing's happening, by going back to the powerful words the client uses or the expression on their face. We evoke it. We hold it. And as we do that, we regulate and order it. We order it. And I'll talk to you a bit about that, about the tango and how we do that. And as we order it, the client's window of tolerance expands. They're able to deal with more, and they're able to look into that darkness that they've been avoiding with the therapist. And the therapist is emotionally present and with them. The therapist is not a distant expert. When the client cries, the therapist says, yes, this is so hard. I can feel this too. This is worth weeping for, isn't it? I can feel this too. I want you to notice that even if as I give you these examples, I am singing to your amygdala. I am not talking to your prefrontal cortex with information. Information is great, but so often it doesn't change anything very much, especially not when we're dealing with emotional issues. You have to sing to the amygdala. And when you do that, it matters how you do it. So I can tell you the most profound things that can change your life. And I can do it in the kind of voice I'm using now for this seminar, which is very short, and we're all writing notes. And I can do it this way. And I assure you, it will have no impact whatsoever. But if I do what we call risk, where you pay attention to the emotional music that you're playing and you involve someone into it, you move somebody into it with you, then I repeat myself, because it's hard to take in alien, scary, unacceptable things the first time. I have to sidle up to them. I have to look at them from the side. I repeat myself, and I use images, and I go soft and slow and simple and specific. Bottom line, if you want to work with emotion from an EFIT, humanistic point of view, you have to know how to slow down and go soft, like a mother singing a lullaby. And you have to remember the key words that clients use, that they refer to their inner world. You have to remember them, right? So I'll talk a bit more about that later, but it matters how you do it. It matters how you do it, how you go into emotion. It's not just about labeling it, referring to it, and going on. So we work with emotion directly. We go to the heart of the matter. We're on target. The problem is affect, and PTSD is an affective disorder. Right, so we go straight into the affect disorder, right? Which we don't try to teach skills from the outside, etc. So EFIT is relational, and we are relational beings. And I know how to tune into a client, and the way I know that is because I have a clear map given to me by emotion and all the research on EFT over the years. I know people's deepest longings. I know their deepest vulnerabilities. They're all the same for all of us. I know what creates resilience, what people need in order to move through trauma. And I know that in these traumatic experiences, they're basically identity dramas. They create our sense of self. And we know how to work through emotion in a way that helps people create new models of self. Okay, so let me see. What have I not said to you? There's so much I have not said to you in this very short talk, but never mind. I think the only other thing I want to say is that as a result of all the research on EFIT and EFT, we know what corrective emotional experiences look like. We know what these emotional epiphanies, if you like, these identity dramas that create change look like. We have 9 studies that tell us this is the kind of interaction in therapy. This is the kind of moments that you have to create to have change at the end of therapy, and change that lasts 3 years in. All kinds of change. Change in your sense of attachment, your sense of self, change in how you see other people, change in relational distress, your ability to trust, change in depression, anxiety, etc., etc. So we know where we're going, right? And that makes the journey so much easier. We know what these moments of change look like. We know how to get there, and we know what we have to teach therapists in order to help them get there. EFIT evolves in 3 stages. You create stabilization and emotional balance by listening to somebody's story, making sense of it, putting it into patterns of emotion and patterns of interaction. And then you go into stage 2, when people have their emotional balance, where you go deeper, you go into the emotional pain, into it and out the other side. And you find in that process the existential dilemmas that we all face. We're all terrified of uncontrollability, helplessness. We're all terrified. We all can say the same things that your clients say when they feel traumatized, right? That they feel hijacked, etc., etc. They feel overwhelmed, or they feel empty. They can't count on themselves. They can't count on others. You find the same issues, and you can stand beside people and stand with people and hold them as they work through those and come out the other side, where they can have a secure, coherent sense of self, of belonging in the world. They can accept their needs, and they know how to work to get those needs met. Okay, I have so much to say in so little time. So now I'm going to talk to you. You know, we have what we call micro interventions that all humanistic therapists use, although EFIT, we sort of go over the top with some of them. Interventions like reflection. We reflect all the time. Right? Roger said a good reflection is not a repetition, it's a revelation. So when you reflect, you hold a mirror, a clearer mirror, an ordered mirror up to somebody's experience, so they can see it and begin to own it, right? That's what you do. And we do that all the time. So we focus people, we keep them on track. EFT is very attuned to your clients. You follow them, but you also lead. And one of the ways you lead is to clarify experience. So we reflect, we ask very simple evocative questions. What's happening to you right now? What's that like for you? How are you feeling as you talk about this? What's it like to tell me this, right? What's happening in your body? We ask those kinds of questions. We heighten emotion by staying, repeating it, using the client's images. I'm drowning, I'm on fire, I'm lost in the desert. Yeah. So we use those images again and again to go into the affect. That's what we do. And then we take that affect, regulate it, moderate it, and then turn it into actual dramas, either with imaginary figures inside people's heads, or in couples therapy with an actual partner sitting in front of you, into dramas where these inner emotional realities are enacted. And as they're enacted, they can become clearer and people can begin to change them. And you have slides, and in your slides you have dancing the EFIT tango. Let's talk about that for a minute because we're already losing our time. So, and I'm going to talk a little bit about my client, Allison, here. Allison is the one who says, I can't feel, I can't bear it, and I can't bear being numb either. And her main way of becoming unnumb is to cut or to bang her head on the wall. Okay, this is my client, Allison. So I'll use her as an example. This is a macro set of interventions, the tango. We looked at what successful EFIT and EFT therapists did, and we said, hey, look, they're always doing this. They're always doing this sequence. Isn't that interesting? So really, let's look at the moves in this dance. Well, the first move in the dance is you listen to someone, tune in, and you focus beneath the content, beneath the list of symptoms. You know, yes, I gamble, and yes, I do this, and I'm a bad mother, and I'm da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and I have anger fits. And you listen, and you go to the emotional and relational level. You start to pick up and reflect the present processes, the way somebody is regulating their emotion, the way they dance with their own emotions, the way they dance with other people, and how those two things, of course, begin to slide together. The more isolated you are, the more alone you are, the more helpless you're going to feel, the more intense your emotions are going to be, etc., etc., etc. So when I first see Allison, she says, I have 5 diagnoses: borderline, anxiety, depression. Nobody had given her a diagnosis of complex PTSD, which is amazing to me, since she was raped all through her childhood by her older brothers and suffered in silence because she believed that if she said what was happening with her, her family would split up and her father would kill her brothers, etc. So she comes to me as a 26-year-old suffering from severe depression. And she tells me that when she gets upset, she cannot talk to her husband, even though she knows he loves her and he's safe. She goes off in her room and closes the door and is stuck in her room for 2 or 3 days until she finds a way to wade through this emotion and come out again. But the main symptom she comes up with in the beginning is anger. She says, I'm angry all the time. I'm angry. And I don't even know why I'm angry. So in humanistic therapy like EFIT, we go below the surface emotion, below the information, the symptoms, and we go into the real deeper emotional significance of that. So it's not very long in EFIT before I'm asking questions where she starts to be able to go beyond just, well, I'm angry. So at the beginning, I'll say, so you're angry and you can't turn to other people for support and you feel alone. And the more alone and angry and upset you are, the more you try to shut down and avoid these feelings because they're too much, you can't feel. And the more you can't feel, and the more you shut you down and other people out, and the lonelier you are, and the more you're caught in all this depression. Am I getting it right? This is the problem. The problem is how she's processing her experience. It is the dance, the emotional dance she's caught in, and dance she's caught in with others that is the problem. This is the problem. She's not bad or dysfunctional or there's something wrong with her. She's caught in this process. And we can all get stuck in these processes. It's the most human thing to do. We seek protection, and then we realize it's a prison. She's caught. So it's the process that's the problem. And I go into that with her, and she starts to have a meta perspective on how she's caught in these processes and what she does with her emotion. Once she starts to be able to see that, it gives her a kind of perspective. We go into move 2, where we do affect assembly. We stay with her emotion, and we stay with the basic elements of any emotional experience: the trigger, the perception, the body response, the meaning, and the action tendency. This is what emotion is. It breaks down into these factors, every emotion. So you say, what is the trigger for your depression? She says, I don't know. I don't know, and I don't want to talk about it. I don't even know why I'm in therapy. All right, okay. And don't suggest that to focus inside, I close my eyes, because that's ridiculous. It's stupid. Okay, fine. All right. So let's look at the trigger. What happened the last time before you went into a deep depression, a deep depressive episode? I don't know. And I remember talking on the phone. What was the trigger on the phone? And then we have to stay with it. You stay, somebody was asking me for something. She had a childhood full of her brothers demanding sexual favors and of starving of affection and nobody seeing her. One of the key issues with complex PTSD is nobody saw me. Nobody cared about my pain. I didn't exist. Nobody. And now the therapist says, I see you. I see you. And right now, I'm with you. And you are just a human being struggling like we all struggle. I see you. You are normal. You are caught in this dance, right? So we go for the trigger. We go for what happened. What happens inside your body? Nothing. Yes, let's stay with that. What happens inside your body as you talk about this? Well, I feel a bit shaky. You feel shaky? Yeah. So somebody demands something of you. You feel shaky. And then what happens? Well, then what happens is I go into a fog. Go into a fog. Yeah. I dissociate. Isn't that what you call it? I dissociate. Okay, you dissociate. You go into a fog, right? And what do you say to yourself? Well, maybe I'm crazy. This must be me. This must have been my fault. Why didn't I fight? Why didn't I fight my brothers? Maybe I'm crazy. But mostly I just go into this incredible fog and I can't get out of it. Okay. And then what do? You follow the sequence. This is the meaning. You say to yourself, this is my fault. You say to yourself, well, I can't deal with this. It's overwhelming. There's no way out. There's no escape. This is what you say to yourself. And then what do you actually do? I used to beat my head on the wall. I still do it sometimes, but I used to beat my head on the wall. Aha. Self-injury. So then what would happen then? I don't know, somehow I'd kind of come out of it and I'd eat zoodles. I'm English, I have no idea what zoodles are. Apparently, you guys, it's some sort of chip or something, or maybe it's a cereal. Anyway, she'd say I'd come and I'd eat zoodles, and then I'd just watch TV for a day. And then she'd come out of her room. Her husband would say, are you all right? She'd say, I'm fine. And it would start again. But what she will tell you is I'm depressed and angry, right? And if you listen, where we go, when we keep doing this affect assembly and deepening, she goes into primary affect. The primary affect underneath the pain of trauma is always sadness, loss, deprivation. And there's a huge longing underneath that for connection. Deprivation of longing is always shame. This must be me. I'm damaged. There's something wrong with me. Why did this happen to me? I should have been able to change it, right? And of course, all kinds of fear. Fears of rejection, abandonment, being overwhelmed, going crazy, etc., etc. These are the affects that come up. So I ask her, and what's happening to you right now? And gradually, by session 5, she's saying, I don't know why, but I feel sad. I feel sad. So we stay with that, and sad. We stay with that, right? Sad and scared. But what's the main one, Allison? I'm sad. And then we stay with that a bit, and we find that depression dissolves into heartbroken. I'm heartbroken. I was not seen. I was not protected. I was not held. I was not comforted. Yes, you are heartbroken. And what do we do when we're heartbroken? We know what to do when we're heartbroken. It's obvious. The functional thing is to weep for ourselves, to weep and grieve what happened to us, and to be able to turn to others and grieve and get comfort, right? And this is the way home for Allison. So move to affect assembly. We go into, we distill, we hold, and we at the same time regulate emotion. We go into core emotions. And when we have this emotional engagement, and we have this emotional balance where people can tolerate it, we then go into move 3, where we take these things and we turn them into dramas. Fritz Perls did this years ago. Many therapies do this kind of thing. We have a very particular way of doing it. You have to have the emotion up and running and relevant to make this really work. So we go in, and in EFIT, we don't have an attachment figure there or another person from the person's life. We go into their imagination, and we say, you know, you might say to someone like Allison, can you imagine, can you go back there to where you told your father what happened when you were 16 and he dismissed it and he said, it's just a childhood mistake? What happens to you when you hear his voice saying, it was just a mistake, it wasn't anything, it didn't matter? What happens to you when you go into that and you say, could you even imagine just turning and telling him what you just said to me? You can do that with an imaginary attachment figure. Often people choose to deal with the depriving figure who didn't protect them, the mother who walked out of the room, rather than the abusing figure. But many times we go for the essence of vulnerability, because good therapy is a different kind of encounter with your vulnerability, one that empowers you rather than leaving you helpless. Many times we'll go and we'll encourage people to see themselves as a child. So with Allison, I go into, Allison, can you see that little tiny Allison? She comes up with this image, not until about session 4. It's a dangerous image. Can you see Allison under the bed, holding onto her dolls, up against the wall, desperately hoping her brothers aren't coming for her? Can you see that little child? When I first asked her that, she says, no, I can't. No, No, I don't want to see her. No, I don't know why I brought up that image. Gradually, I go back to it. And she says, yes, I can see her. And then she begins to explore. I say, what's that like? What happens to you as you see her? She says, I feel sad. She's scared, sad and scared, right? And we stay with that image. We work that drama. I say, what would you, the strong Allison that came for therapy, that has so much courage, validation is a huge part of EFIT, validating, constantly giving the message, you are strong, you are capable, there is nothing wrong with you. So what would the capable, strong Allison who survived, who found a way out, what would she like to say with that little one? And she says, I don't know, there's nothing to say. I say, okay, how are you feeling as you look at her? What would you like to do? She said, I'd like to go in and hold her. I say, good. Then you go in and hold small little Allison under the bed, holding her dolly, terrified that her brothers are coming, helpless and alone. Can you go in and hold her? And she says, and she weeps, and she says, yes, I can hold her. I can hold her. This is the kind of thing that happens this is a corrective, the beginning of a corrective emotional experience. She needs to deepen this and stay with it and do it more, which she will do in stage 2 of EFIT. But this is the real beginning of Allison's journey to come home. She takes this vulnerable part of herself, accepts it, holds it, comforts it, and takes it into a different place. In the primer, my client that I talk about a lot in the primer, which was the most traumatized woman I've ever worked with, she did the same kind of thing, but it took her much longer because she was very, very symptomatic. She did the same thing with her little self the first time her father raped her, which she didn't even remember at the beginning of therapy, but she did the same thing. And when she finished that experience, which was incredibly difficult for her, but I was with her, she was not alone in it. We processed it and ordered it. And when she'd gone through that experience, she was able to say to me, it's all right now, Sue, because I have me. I have the adult, capable me. I know I can see that experience, tolerate it, accept it, and work through it. I'm strong enough. Move 4 in the tango is you process what's happened. You integrate and talk about, look what you did, what happened here, what did you do? You touch this emotion, oh my God, how courageous of you, that's incredible. And then you created this drama, that's amazing. And sometimes you deal with blocks. People say, no, I didn't really do anything. And then you accept the block and you say, it's difficult for you to really take in that you can be strong, that you did this. Let's stay with that, what's so hard. And move 5, you're going to integrating and validating. What I always say to people is, integrating and validating in EFIT does not look like your boss giving you a good evaluation and saying, jolly, jolly good. That doesn't work. I encourage people to validate the way they talk to their dogs. Have you ever noticed how people talk to their dogs? Dogs are safe attachment figures. So we go over the top. We don't say good. When the dog greets you at the door, we say, oh, that's amazing. You're such a good dog. You know, who's the most beautiful dog? Yes, yes, you're so lovely. Yes, you are. Now, I'm being facetious, but I'm not. Okay, because when you give validation and the message that I see you and I see you're worthy and you're competent and you're strong and you're special, I see you. When you give that to somebody with complex PTSD, you are literally pouring light into a dark pit that has been dark for years. And you do that. You do that the way a mother does it to a child who has taken a risk, put their toe in the water or something. The mother doesn't say, good. The mother says, look at you. You're so brave. You're so brave. Okay, so we do not have much time, and I promised Victoria, that I would take a few questions. That is a gallop through, and self-harm is just part of this trauma picture. It's one of the ways people have of regulating their emotions. From that point of view, I think we have to not be freaked out by it, but respect it, that it's the only strategy that they've come up with, and many times it's a call for help. I can remember working with a couple where the woman had been through terrible trauma, and she would call her husband and say she was going to commit suicide or cut herself if he didn't come back home. And her psychiatrist and her husband pathologized this and basically used it to say how sick and crazy she was. She had gone through all kinds of neurological damage in a rape. And, this didn't help at all. But in the sessions, what I was able to do was talk about how she was calling for help. She needed an escape. She didn't actually want to die. And of course, the more she called and the more her husband did not hear her, the more desperate she became, the more she called, etc., etc., etc. So we work with couples and traumatized couples, and we work with individuals. I hope I've given you a little taste of that this morning. So I will now do what I said. I will stop, and maybe we can have a couple of questions.
Thank you so much, Sue, for sharing all of your knowledge and your presentation and your work with Allison in particular. Some folks are surprised that you got that far with Allison by session 4, that by that session, she was able to picture herself hiding under her bed.
Yes, our experience in couples and in individuals, it makes sense. If you know where you're going, you know the path and the journey, you feel confident, you trust the model, you get there faster. That's the truth. Is like, a GPS. You say, well, where are we going? What's the route? Oh, yeah, I know that route. Yeah, okay. You move faster. All our research says that EFT, and now we have a new study, it's not out yet, on EFIT, in 20 sessions, we can really move. But then you have to, it's all about being on target. That's what it is. And knowing how to work with the core of the matter, which is these very, very difficult emotions.
Yeah, having that map, you're saying, is what really.
Yes, thank you. Having that map, yes.
Can you talk a bit more about pacing in EFIT?
Yes. This is where attunement comes in. Attunement really matters. And what we like to do is we talk about going to the leading edge of people's experience. We'll go to the edge because we know that we have a trust that people can move, especially if we're with them and we're helping them formulate their experience and clarify it. On the other hand, you have to respect people's ability. For example, in the book, the EFIT primer, I talk about working with Henny. Well, for the first 10 sessions, all Henny would do is switch between intellectual subject from intellectual subject. And if I tried to touch an emotion, she'd just look at me like a deer in the headlights and switch again. And she was fast. I couldn't, and the first 10 sessions, I couldn't even make sense of her story. Okay, it was so garbled. She said to me, I'll show you a picture of it. And she brought a picture in. She said, this is a terrible picture. And it was a picture of a church. And I said, Henny, there are no people in this picture. She said, oh, aren't there? Aren't there? She was very high on dissociation. Well, it takes 15 sessions to find out that. She drew me a picture of the day her mother and her sister and her went to church, and the church was closed. And so they went back home and found their father raping their infant sister. And that's what that's about. But it took her 15 sessions. So she was very slow in the beginning, and I had to wait. I had to formulate her story, stay with her, make sense of what she said, and wait. And if I said, this is difficult for you, she'd say, it's not difficult. And I said, I understand. Okay. It's okay, it's not difficult. But then next time I come back and say, gee, this would be hard for me to talk about. This is hard. Stay with hard, just hard. And gradually she says, yes, it's hard. I said, right, it's so risky, it's hard. Yes, it's hard. So what's happening for you now in your body as you even risk just telling me this story? So then you go gently, you fit the pacing to the client. On the other hand, when you get used to this model and you know where you're going, you have a map. You say, let's go down here. And the client says, no, I don't want to go down there. Say, oh, well, let's talk about how difficult it is for you to make the turn. I understand this is too hard. So with Allison, at one point, she said, I think it was the end of session 3 or something. She says, well, I'm not going to feel, and I'm not going to, and don't you ask me to close my eyes because I don't want to. And this is stupid. Right. And she'd drink her water bottle and blow her nose and change her hair and look at her plant. Right. And so I'd say, I understand this is just much too hard. Let's talk about how hard it is. And once we did that, next session she came in and she did it. All the things that she refused to do before, like close her eyes. And we're collaborative. We share. People say, why do I have to close my eyes? I say, oh, you don't have to. You don't have to. But we find that if you close your eyes, you're able to tune in better to what's happening to you. But maybe that's too hard right now. Right. So we share what we're doing with people, that we're collaborative. Okay.
Yeah. You stay so close to the client as the session.
Thank you. That's a very good way to put it. You stay close to the client's experience and what's going on with them in the present moment, and you process that with them. Yes. Thank you.
There's a question here, Sue. It says there are some trauma therapists who believe you should not directly elicit the traumatic event, that it can cause damage, that it can increase symptoms. Curious to hear what you think about this.
Well, I understand that they're concerned. The first thing is we don't want to hurt. You have to use your client as a guide here. Your client will tell you when they're ready to touch that experience. The client will tell you when they're ready to process. Okay. I've worked with clients who, haven't actively gone in, for example, and confronted the perpetrator, who they always knew was the enemy. You're right, from when they were a child, they knew the father was the enemy. And there's something awful and painful, but clean about that. But what they do need to do is go in and touch the experience of having the mother walk away. Mm-hmm. The mother turn away and walk out of the room and deny that what happened. That they need to go into. It's the client that decides that, not you. However, I'm going to say something a bit confrontative now. If you don't know how to deal with powerful emotion and hold it and move somebody through it, no, you should not take people in a traumatic experience. Mm. But if you do, and you know how to walk with your client and use your client as a guide, yes, you do. Like Henny, when did she didn't remember ever actually being raped herself. She just watched her sisters being raped all through her childhood. She remembers it. This lady had an enormous list of symptoms. She remembers it around session 20, and she goes into it. But we've done so much work by that time. She goes into it and she sees herself lying on the bathroom floor. And of course it's painful and she weeps, but she can tolerate it. I can help her put it together and order it. She keeps going. I don't say, let's keep going here. She keeps going. Okay. She goes through the experience and it's a healing experience. The tricky part is, if you're going to resolve pain, you have to feel it. Mm-hmm. People feel it anyway. You can't protect people from their pain. That's a craziness. If they're going to work with their vulnerability and change it, they have to feel it. The question is dosing and pacing and care and taking care of your client. I can honestly say, in all the years we've worked with trauma with individuals and couples, and I've supervised an awful lot of people too, I can't remember once where somebody had a complete meltdown or was re-traumatized. You have a lot of control over your client processing emotion. If you know how to do it, you don't re-traumatize people. You take them through in a way that leaves them balanced and safe. And you take them through to the other side. if you leave them avoiding that traumatic experience their whole lives, I think you have to put it this way. I'm trying to deal with my fear of water at the moment. And I was in the pool swimming along with a noodle. At my age is ridiculous. Swimming along with a noodle, okay, just trying to feel comfortable. And I had this enormous flash that I'm trying to stay on the top of the water all the time, just like our clients. I'm trying to stay on the top of the water. Well, of course, you can't really, so you tip in, right? The more you try to stay on the top, you can't. And I suddenly had this flash of, oh, what you have to do is actually agree to be in the water. You have to actually let yourself be in the water, and then your body goes on this angle,
right,
and then you can swim. And I suddenly had the experience of, oh, I have to actually be in the water and accept being in the water to be able to deal with my fear of swimming. Right. And once I do that, it's like, oh, and I could even start to lose my balance. I could even start to feel afraid. And I could say, it's okay. I'm in the water. I don't have to be on the top. I'm in the water and I'm not dying, and it's okay. And so I don't know whether that's relevant, but it's a kind of a metaphor.
Yeah, what a great metaphor. You have to feel your emotions in order to have a corrective emotional experience.
Thank you. You say it so much better. It's all these,
I
you've
don't.
been listening to all these seminars. You should do this seminar.
Thank you, Sue. You have so much fun being a therapist, don't you?
Yes, I do. It's the most intoxicating profession in the world, because you learn about being human, your own humanness, and what a privilege that is.
Yeah.
Nice to talk to everybody. Take care, everyone. Thank you for turning up. Okay.
Thank you. Take care. Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.